Good evening, gang. Kevin here, Life22. And today, we are reviewing Ben Shapiro's new book, Lions and Scavengers. I had it in here. We're redoing the studio. It's an annual occurrence. So, I became a lifetime member of the Daily Wire last month, 2 months ago. Whenever they first offered it, it was before they started advertising that they're offering it. I want to say it was probably October then. And I got an invitation. It came through at like 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up at 5, and I saw it in my email, and I was like, should I do this? I always think it's a great idea when you can, something you enjoy and something you pay for, that if you can just like hop on the bandwagon, become a lifetime member of something like that. And it took me like 30 minutes, and then I became a member, and all of a sudden I started thinking like, man, I wonder if I'm like the first. And then I was like, well, I would have had to be the first to be offered. I mean, the first wave, the second wave, it was kind of exciting in my head. And I'm like, knowing my luck, I probably am not. But I had bought my version and signed by Mr. Ben Shapiro. I did not read the hard copy. I listened to the Audible. So I also bought one of those. And then with my lifetime membership, like a month later, I got my Daily Wire 24 karat gold pin and a signed copy of Lions and Scavengers. I've read a lot of Ben's books. I'm a daily listener to Ben, as most of you are probably shocked and in awe of. Yeah, oh my God, that conservative guy, Kevin. Anyways, the reason I like Ben is because he's concise and to the point. And so being a daily listener to Ben, listening to his podcast over the last like 2.5, 3 years, I've been a listener for, I've listened to Ben for probably the last like 7 to 10. I've been a full-time like subscriber and listener for the last 5. I want to say it was, I became a member right after the election of 2020, which was like the first day I started actually like listening to the play-by-play was the 2020 election. I was going to get my lead certification class done for lead-based paints. And I was driving up there on election day, and on my drive up, I was listening to the play-by-play of the election, and then I was driving home listening to more play-by-play, and it was just kind of, it was kind of good seeing, like listening to it, and that's what got me hooked. And since then, during 2020, during the year of COVID, I was like into Audible and stuff and listening to not so much into podcasts as I was. I was getting into books because of COVID. And some of the books that I had listened to in 2021 and 2022 after listening to Ben more regularly was a few of his other books, which I don't know if we've reviewed on the channel. There was a large period. It was the first year of COVID that I listened to like 32 books, and then I started listening. I started reviewing them. So there's a lot of books that just got listened to and, absorbed by me that didn't get reviewed on the channel. And a lot of times after these books sit in my mind for a while, like I'd have to reread them in order for me to feel comfortable giving you a proper review. But I did just finish this one yesterday. If you follow me on X, you probably saw that I had finished listening to it. Yeah, so now I have 2 signed copies of this book, and you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm a Ben fan. He is not my favorite author, so I do have to let, I'm probably going to lose cred on the Daily Wire for saying that he is in my daily routine, if that says anything. It's one of those things like, sorry, Ben, you don't make the greats with, like Thomas Sowell and, Dostoevsky and, not that Dostoevsky is my favorite author either. I guess I'm new to literary works but I do follow obviously, when Ben had the book club, I took all of his recommendations to heart and listened to almost all of them, except for the tail end there. Like, I made it through the whole, like, T.H. White series of, King Arthur and Merlin and all the extended editions and all of them, including the, so there was that. I did not read Ben's last book. I own it. I have to listen to it. It's on the wish list. There's just so many other books that I listen to and review, and I'm actually working on a book right now that hopefully will have the author on the show to discuss his take, and so on his own book. So and hopefully in the future we'll get guys like Ben on the show to discuss his book, Lions and Scavengers. But to kind of describe this book in a nutshell, and then we'll do what I normally do on the show, which is going to go through play by play, chapter by chapter, and kind of describe a lot of the different, some of the highlights of the book, without trying to be a spoiler. But like a lot of the devil is in the details. So you really have to listen to these books, because you got to think that, like, I might have been a victim of Tylenol, and might be on the spectrum to some degree. I can't absorb everything. When some things that I absorb, I can't, like, recall, like, as quickly as you would think in, like, weeks, days after a book review. I'll be like, man, I should have brought that up. I forgot. And that's where we are. But so essentially, like, being a regular listener to Ben, I'm sitting there listening to this book, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when Ben discussed this. I remember when Ben discussed that. What Ben does differently in his books, if you're just a daily listener to Ben, or maybe you're not a listener at all, but what he does in his books that sets his books aside from his daily podcast is that he allows it to culminate over like days, weeks, and months, years even, and then what he does is he picks a topic, like what is it? 3 Easy Steps to Destroy America, and he talks about disintegrationism. And he makes that the theme, right? Like, so he picks, like in this book, he picks lions and scavengers, and he discusses, like, the difference between a lion, a scavenger, and then kind of goes into, like, different subsects of each category in which to better convey his ideas that he's generated off of the last few years, and he will bring in literary works and things like that to bring it all together for you, making it more easily digestible. So it's something just to kind of, like, mull over. So, like, a lot of times, as Jordan Peterson likes to say, that Ben is like a Gatling gun of words, right? You just let him go, and he's and that is Ben. And a lot of people can't listen to him in 1.5 speed or 2 speed, right? Like, you got to listen to him in regular speed, where everybody else, like, I listen to Ben in 1.5 speed just because I have so many different things to listen to in a day, and it just having that 50% speed, moniker added onto it to give it some more giddy up. It's one of those, right? The lions and the scavengers, though, he takes the topic, right, that at hand, like, where are we in America today since the last time I wrote a book? He says, and he doesn't say that, but, like, you can feel, people can say things without saying them if you can follow along. He describes lions and scavengers. He describes where we are today and his newest perspective of putting them into that context and then explaining that to you. Makes it easier for, like, a novice to understand, and maybe even pick this book up as a hook to get drawn into being a responsible member of society and trying to stay informed. A lot of us do. A lot of people don't. Us, as in people that are engaged, do. People that are just Joe voter, just kind of like they hear the news reported on a a television in a coffee shop. You walk into the coffee shop, you're at Starbucks or wherever, and you order your coffee, and then there's your news just kind of filtering in the background. It'd be like, oh yeah, so it depends on what coffee shop you walk into or where you're gathering your news or who you're gathering your news from. A lot of times, like, you'll get it and it'll be biased or it'll be unbiased, but you don't know because you just kind of like, it's just like periphery noise to you. So, and then if you're just like lumping along going like, oh yeah, I watched Kevin's podcast and he said I should listen to this book. And then you listen to this book, or you read this book, and you're like, wow, I feel like either this guy is lying or I've been being lied to as I order my coffee every single morning. And it gets you to think. So you can think he's lying. Or you could just realize that mainstream media is lying to you. And at which point, like, books like this should be a hook because they're a great summation of what we've been going through for the last year. So welcome to the team, or welcome to the awakening, right? Like what woke was trying to do, except those people are still sleeping. So now for that very long rant and intro. So Ben's book is 5 hours and 24-minute listen. And it's always when you do a podcast that like everybody blows up your phone. Anyways, regardless, he goes into his opening credits, his dedication, his introduction. And then there are 8 chapters, right? So The Way of the Lion is the first one. And then chapter 2 is The Pride. Chapter 3 are the rules of the pride. And in those 3, right, he describes what it is to be a lion, right? What people now label as toxic masculinity, right? Like, no, the willingness to do things that need to be done, right? Like, I don't want to be harsh with my children, but as the great Jordan Peterson says, it is better that you parent your children and harden them to the ways of the world than allowing the world to harden them. Because the world is a much crueler teacher. And that is very true. So that's why I have to do things. Like, do I want to... And in no way should my speech here or my discussion about how I raise my children be construed as abuse, right? So, like, there's certain things that, like, you do as a parent. Like, do you want to... A good example is, like, do I want to send my son to his room when he's bad, being disruptive, being a jerk to his siblings, being a jerk to his mother? Do I want to send him to his room and not let him enjoy a movie or a video game with us, with the other members of his family? Like, no. I would love to play a video game with my son. I would love to sit down and watch a movie with him. But every time we have those opportunities where we do these family functions, one of the 2 boys, and it's usually one over the other, will, like, screw it up. And they'll have to be punished, right? Like, it's okay, you gotta go to your room. You miss out on this time. So you miss out on enjoying time with us as a family, enjoying time with your dad, enjoying time with your mom, with your sister, with your other brother, with your other sister. Like, you miss time with us. And, like, do I enjoy that? No. Would I rather just put my foot in my mouth and be like, well, I want to spend time with my son? Like, I would love to. But at the same time, it is my responsibility as a parent to lay down the rule and harden my kid to the way of the world. Because you can't always get what you want and be able to act and hold yourself in whatever manner you want. You have to act in a certain way. And when you act outside of the tolerances of the parameters in which you are expected to act, you will be disciplined. In this case, in this scenario, you miss out on the movie. And do I like it? No. But I am the parent that has to do what is necessary, and my wife will do the same thing, but we are the parents that will do what is necessary to teach the lesson, even though it's a tough decision, and I don't want to make it, but I have to. I have to be firm, and in that, I draw strength from my masculinity and say, this is what a tough dad would do. I want to enjoy this with my son. Am I disappointed in his behavior? Yes. Am I going to... It is more of my duty to my son to make that decision and to hold firm to that decision of his punishment than it is for me to be his friend in that moment. And those are the different things. That's what people label as toxic masculinity. Oh, he's so mean. He's so tough. It's like, you know what? Guess what? You got to be tough, because otherwise you're raising sheep. Or you're too much of a sheep and your kids will turn out like lions. And there's another book that we listened to earlier on in the show, in the channel, that I may not have reviewed that one either. It was called Raising Lions. It was a recommendation from Brian Callen, who's been on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is another good book for raising kids. And it talks about, and it really does describe a lot of kids to a T, the rebelliousness, things like that. So to get into that lion mentality, right? But there are ways of the lion. There are, and I didn't learn this until I got older, was moral, like having a moral code, a strict moral code that I live by. And then, like, actually, because I was always wishy-washy on a lot of things, like, oh yeah, you can make a joke about this, you can make a joke about that, and the downside to making these jokes and these puns and these and making light of a lot of things without having discernible beliefs and values into this stuff is that you kind of go through life without having a solid grasp on good and evil. And so as you start to experience more in the world, and if you can be taught this rubric when you are younger, I feel like it is, I kind of got it by observation with my parents, because it was never kind of like spelled out as much as I would have liked it to be. But, you don't always get what you want. You don't always get what you like, and so, like, I had to kind of come into it as a parent, like, who was not, sent to church for a moral code and all these other things. I was, I was kind of an onlooker to other families that were, sending their kids to church and learning good, solid moral values and, things like that. But you also have to understand that, like, there are things that a lion will do in the world to follow a good and moral way of life that may not be what you want. Another good example of things that you don't want, I believe, also from the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh had pointed this out. It's like, you know what? Hey, did I want our president to come through and, grab, illegal vegetable farmers, right? Well, like, was that the goal? Like, well, I mean, we told him to get rid of everybody who's here illegally, and then he, and it was, well, we're going to start with the real serious criminals, the hardened criminals, the drug dealers, the human traffickers, the rapists, we're going to start with all the bad ones and work our way down. And the game plan is to, anybody who is not here legally. And does it suck to watch, some 50-year-old, grapefruit cultivator getting, like, nabbed out of the field with his compatriots and hauled away, and they're just, like, making a living? Like, yeah, it's not the most pleasant thing to watch, but at the same time, it's also we said take care of that category. Like, sometimes, like, I don't want my neighbors to keep feeding all the cats, because then the stray cats start reproducing and pissing in my garage and giving birth under my neighbor's porch and my other neighbor's porch and all these other things. And all of a sudden, like, when you finally get that person to stop feeding the cats, you're now starving 40 cats instead of starving 2 strays. Because that's just the inevitability of the world. If you allow things to get out of control, when it comes time for cleanup, it is going to be a harsh reality. And just like we've talked about on the show, when you get rid of, when you discuss addressing dragons or problems that you have in the world, then the longer you let that dragon feed off of, like, your neglect of paying attention to the problem, the bigger the problem becomes and the harder it is to grapple with it. And so hence, those are just a few of the things to describe, not so much in Ben's words, but in my own, on how he describes the way of a lion, a morally compassed, strong person who is in control of his faculties, but always is aware of this, like we discussed, right? A man strong enough to tame his own dragon, his own, like, you watch men out there getting arrested, right? Because they just let their dragon run loose, right? And in this sense, the dragon that is their their proclivity for beautiful women or cars or shiny objects, right? And then they steal them, they take them, they possess them, right? And then they get in trouble because they violate the law to do it, because they're overcome with their lust and greed for these items and these things, that they're not in control of their faculties. That same, if you can, one of the strongest men is knowing that they have a dragon or a beast inside of them and they have tamed it. They are able to take control of it, right? Like having possession of your emotional intelligence and saying, hey, listen, I know that I could overreact this way, but I'm not going to. Right now, this person spit in my face, they did whatever, and I am being the bigger person. I'm in control. But knowing that I could also, like, decimate this person because I have this dragon that I am entirely in control of, and if I so wished, could decimate. And that is how Ben describes the lions. Now, the scavengers are ones that they play victim. They use mind games. They use their weakness as a strength, and using the moral code of the lions to dismantle the lion's authority. So lions are also, as he describes, are entrepreneurs, are explorers, are people willing to conquer and to rule and set up huge empires, right? And the scavenger doesn't have any of these things, nor do they have the want or the will to try to operate them, but they are also lustful for power, where a lion will have power and are so afraid of what could happen if their power became limitless, right? Like I've got this raw energy but I've learned to focus it, and I can focus it and destroy anything I want to. What happens if I go too far? And the scavengers use that thought process and that moral code of the lion to dismantle them. And Ben brings that up a lot in the book. So obviously chapter 4, the way of the scavenger. Chapter 5, the pack, which is the group of scavengers, and then chapter 6 is the rules of the pact. He gives real life examples from current events, like October 7th, and now I'm drawing a blank of a few other examples, but there's been different riots and shootings and things like that where he talks about how, politicians' reactions and which ones are lions and which ones are actually just trying to dismantle the system for their own personal vendettas, their own ability to try to just dismantle what is. And then chapter 7 is bloodlust and blood guilt. And the bloodlust is that ability for the lion to decimate, to achieve the tough realities of goals or goal-oriented stuff, where the lion can conquer and then build and build and build and build. And then the blood guilt is like the guilt of all of that which he has slain, which he must repent for, at the same time knowing that what he did was for a greater good. And the scavengers feed on that blood guilt, and that's how they get their foot in the door. And that's a little bit of it. The other part is chapter 8, the lion's roar, which is kind of his call to action. Ben describes, how the Israelis they're fed up with it. They're tired of Hamas and the decades of the nonsense and the brutal rape and beheading of their people on October 7th, and how each and every one of them have kind of picked up arms and said, you know what? This isn't your land. We know the games you're playing, and we're not going to play them. They talk about the Scavengers. Here's another example from the book. The Lions have a code, like don't harm women and children. Don't do these things, right? They have a moral code. And so what does Hamas do? Hamas hides in hospitals. They pretend to be civilians, even though they know that the Geneva Convention exists and they're not allowed to harm civilians and harm, the disabled from war, things like that. And they're, you can't just shoot hostages, right? Like they know these rules. And so then you have terrorists that are like, whoa, we don't play by those rules. You do. And we're playing against your rules because we don't have rules. We are lawless monsters. And that's why Israel calls before they bomb a building to make sure there's no civilians inside. Do they not hit a lot of their enemy combatants? Yes, they miss out on a ton of them because they're giving them pre-warning, but they're also saving civilian lives. It is a very difficult game they play when you have a moral code, as a lion would, and you are fighting monsters who don't have any such code and are willing to sacrifice babies in carriages with car bombs. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when we first went over to Afghanistan, and they would have live and or animatronic babies in strollers and have women pushing them to get near the American soldiers, and then they would explode. And so eventually, when you're a soldier and you're a young 22-year-old kid and you're over there and you see a lady coming over with a stroller, you're just like, have there been American soldiers or other foreign agents, other foreign entities that are allies of ours that have shot women with strollers that weren't actually bombed, booby-trapped babies? Like, maybe. But they've built that fear. And now we can't even trust that because we know. And so now all of a sudden, this thing with Israel is going on, and nobody seems to, remember this stuff. I remember this stuff, and I was, middle school. I just, going into high school, I remember this stuff. I remember seeing little bits and pieces of it. I was that guy at Starbucks that was just getting his, not that I go to Starbucks, but I was the guy that was just getting his news here, there, hit or miss. Grandma has the news playing in the background at Thanksgiving. I'm a young kid. I don't care about the news, and I remember picking up on this. I remember, with how has everybody else forgotten? Anyways, he ends the book with his acknowledgments and then his end credits. And like I said, this is his most recent book. It just came out a few months ago. Yeah, gang. So if you are so and I always invite people of all sides to listen to my book recommendations. This one is a little more political. If you are not on my side of the fence on politics, I still suggest that you read this one. If you're on the fence about reading anything political, I would recommend Thomas Sowell. He should have been an Academy Award. He should have been a Nobel Peace Prize winner for his economics. He's never won one. It is depressing. And his books come across as political, but they're just statistics and facts. And it is so funny to watch an economist be able to call out statistics and facts and then just, it's now a political book. Isn't that funny? Anyways, enough about Thomas Sowell. More to Ben. Ben, thank you for the next chapter in our library. And we will see you guys probably tomorrow on Life22.